everybody, welcome back to JB's Total Gaming, where today we're taking a look at the second part of our Armada tutorial on commands and movement. Now movement's pretty simple, and we'll get to that at the end of the video, but in order to understand movement we need to understand how at least one of the commands works. And while commands may seem pretty complicated at first, but overall they're actually not that bad. There's only 4 of them, and basically there's a command dial and a command token. And command tokens basically give you a somewhat less powerful effect than the dial. But let's go ahead and get down to the board and see how all of that works. Alright, for my example in this video, I decided to use the Raider. Not only because I like the Raider, but because the Raider can go up to speed 4, so it can definitely show off its maneuverability when we get to movements. But right now we're going to talk about commands. So if we look at the turn order for Armada, the first thing that we have is actually the command phase, where we're going to pick what we're going to put on our command dial. Now what we're doing with that command may be this turn, or it may be in a much later turn. We'll see how that works in a second. And, well, then the first thing we do when we get to the ship phase, whenever we activate a ship, and ships are activated individually, one on one side, then one on the other, and back and forth, is that we reveal the command dial, and then we have a choice of what to do with that. So this ship has a command value of 1. Remember, we talked about this on the cards in our first video. That means that this ship has 1 command dial, as we see here. Now, ships with 2 have 2 dials, ships with 3 have 3 dials. The thing is, at the beginning of the game, you're going to choose the command that you're going to have. But if you have 2 or say 3 dials, you're actually choosing your commands for the first 3 rounds of the game. So when I talked earlier, a long time ago in a video about comparing Armada to X-Wing, one of the big things that I said, Armada is more of a strategic game and less tactical. You have to do more long-term planning. So this ship is kind of nice in the fact that every round I get to pick my command, so I can assess the situation at the end of a round, at the start of a round, pick my command, and then reveal it. But when you have more than 1 command dial, you have to plan ahead. So you have to think about what am I going to be doing next turn and the turn after that. And in the game with only 6 rounds, picking your first 3 commands is half the commands you're going to have for that ship for the game. Now, the disadvantage, though, of having only 1 command is that I can only carry 1 command token. There's actually 4 types of command tokens, and they line up perfectly with the 4 types of commands that you can pick on your dial. So whenever I reveal my command, I can either activate it and use that command disk in order to get the full command value, or I can discard it and get a token of the same type. So if I don't want to activate a squadron this round, I can use that token later on and kind of save it. But the thing is because this only has a command value of 1, this ship, if I get a different command token later, I either have to discard this one or that one. You can only have command tokens up to your command value. Also, if you have more than 1 command value, you can't have more than 1 of the same token. So let's say this had a command value of 2, I couldn't store 2 different squadron tokens on there. So how do these work? So let's actually talk about squadrons first of all. So we mentioned squadrons before. Squadrons are pretty cool when you're able to activate them, but not so great if you don't activate them during the round. Because if you use a command in order to activate squadrons, you then look at your squadron value. Now this ship isn't very good at activating squadrons, so it can only activate 1 squadron when it does that command. Now you can tell if you can activate a squadron if they are within short or medium range. So we talked about different dice can fire in different ranges. So if we check from our ship, and then we can check out to see where our squadrons are at. So anything within, from our ship all the way up to here, we'll be able to activate. But if they're outside of that, then we wouldn't. So we would easily be able to activate this squadron. But and then this side is used for the squadrons. We'll get to that when we talk about squadron movement. So I can definitely activate this. And then when I activate a squadron, they get to move and attack. Now we'll talk about squadron movement, but they can move somewhere and attack, they can attack and then move, they can do those in any order that they want to. Now there's some restrictions as to when they can move if they're basically locked down or engaged by another squadron or things like that. But it's really nice because you can do both things. And then this little tab here is in order to show that you have activated that squadron so you can keep track of it throughout the round. And again, if any squadrons haven't been activated during the round, they activate at the end, but only get to do one of those 2 things. So that's how squadrons work. Now the thing is, you can command up to as many as you have. And if you use a token, however, you can only command 1 squadron. So actually, in this ship's case, the squadron token is the same as the squadron command because you only have a squadron value of 1 anyways. But in general, you're not going to be commanding squadrons from this ship. Although maybe having a token on it and using it at some point later, if you only have 1 squadron left or something, hey, not that bad of a thing. Now let's move on to concentrate fire. Now we'll get into attacking in the next video, but basically if I use a concentrate fire dial, then when I attack one of my attacks that round, I can add an extra die to it. Now it has to be a die that is available to me on that attack. So for example, let's say we're attacking out of our side arc here. We can see that we have blue and black dice available. So if I'm attacking within short range here, then I can use my blue and black die. So I could add either one of those to the attack. But let's say the ship was out here in medium range. Well, my black dice aren't able to be used there, so I'd only be firing one blue die, and then I could add another blue die to it by using my concentrate fire token, or excuse me, my actual command disc. Now, if I take a token, however, that lets me re-roll a die. So it's slightly less powerful again, but it's nice to have, and sometimes can be very effective. And we'll get into attacking again in the next video, but that's basically what concentrate fire does. Engineering, the next command we're going to talk about, basically allows you to repair your ship. Now, the engineering value is right here, and this ship has an engineering value of 2. Well, there's a few different things you can do with engineering. So right now this ship is completely at full shields and everything. But let's actually send this down and say we've taken some damage. And with 1 engineering value, I can move a shield. So I could take this down to 1, and then move this up to here. So moving a shield costs 1 engineering value. If I wanted to spend both of my points, I could actually just raise one of my shields 1. Now, this ship normally doesn't have an engineering value of 3, but if I had 3 points available to me, then I can actually repair a face-up damage card. So if I've taken damage on a hull section and it gets down to 0 shields, and then I take more damage, I then take damage cards. I can take damage cards up to my hull value, which is 4. So getting rid of those damage cards is really good. Also, there are critical effects in the game that we'll get into later, and they're really bad. And you can get rid of a critical effect damage card, basically a face-up damage card with 3 points as well. So those are the 3 things you can do with it. Now, it's also nice because engineering tokens, again, give you the effect, but just for a little bit less. Now, in engineering tokens, you get your engineering value halved, rounded up. So in this case, I'd get 1 point. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that you can combine tokens and dials in any way possible. So let's say instead of a squadron token, I had an engineering token. I could spend both of those when I reveal my engineering dial and get 3 points and maybe move a shield and repair a shield or get rid of a damage card or something like that. So that's one way this ship could get rid of a damage card, is by spending both the dial and the token. You can combine all the available tokens you have with the dial that you get. You also can do different ones. So even if I revealed an engineering command, I can also spend a squadron token. So any combination of those are fine. The only thing you can't do is split it up, is say do 2 different engineering actions, one with the dial and one with the token. You combine them all, get the total points, and take 1 engineering action. But you can combine those in any way that you have available to you, so that's a nice little feature. Now the last thing we wanted to talk about is the maneuver command. Now, maneuver normally, when you take it, allows you to both change your speed and also increase your yaw value by 1 up to a value of 2. So what does all that mean? Well, speed's pretty simple. When you start the game, your ship can start at any speed available to it. And 4 is the maximum speed, so this ship could start at 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So if I reveal a maneuver dial, I could, decrease down to 1. I could increase up to 3. Whatever I wanted to do, but then I also get to maneuver more effectively. And in order to understand that, we're going to get into the actual maneuver dial. But we'll show that off in just a second here when we get into movement. And it basically allows me to do both. And you can see this here is, if I'm maneuvering at speed 1, I basically can use the maneuver dial and turn it twice at speed 1. So let me show you what I mean by that. So this is something that a lot of people don't really like about Armada, is this maneuver tool. It works, it's just unwieldy. So that means if I'm moving at speed 1, I can either move straight ahead, I can turn it to 1, or to 2. So that's the yaw value. So that's basically how much I'm turning. So if I wanted to, I could put this maneuver dial into the notch here, move it 2 to the side, and then move it up to there. It's actually kind of hard to do this over the camera, but you get the idea. So that's how it goes. So increasing that turning ability by 1 wouldn't really matter when I'm at speed 1. But let's say I was moving at speed 3. Well, now I can turn at the second notch and third notch by 1, and I lost that little thing there, but so that is the maximum I could say turn to the right there. But because I took this maneuver, I can first of all increase or decrease my speed by 1, and also increase one of these, either this one, or the bottom one down here that I have a value of 0 on right now, by 1, basically making me more maneuverable. And you can combine the two effects. The thing is when you take the token for maneuver, the only thing you can do is change your speed. You could, however, change your speed, if you had both, you could change your speed by 2 and also change your direction by 1. Now in that last example, I actually showed you most of what you need to know for movement. Basically, you can look at the card, determine how much you want to turn, and you can turn like one direction and a different one a different direction in whatever way that you have available to you, however, what speed you're going and if you've taken maneuver or whatever. So that's all fine and dandy. However, there are a few special cases I want to go over. For example, let's say I was moving at speed 1 and my movement would put me here. Well, oh no, that would put me on top of a squadron. In that case, it doesn't matter if the squadrons are yours or your opponent's. You still complete your movement. Basically, the squadrons scramble out of the way. However, your opponent then gets to determine where any squadrons that you would have landed on their base, where they go, just as long as they're touching your ship. So, for example, if this was one of their squadrons, maybe they just plop it right behind touching your ship, and maybe they'd put one of your squadrons way in the front or something like that. So any squadron, yours or your opponent decides where they go around your ship, touching your ship. Now, if you were to land your base on another ship, however, that's a very different thing. So let's say I was moving at speed 2 and that's where my movement would put me. Well, that's real bad. So then I would see if, based on the arc that I had set up to move on, if I can reduce my speed and move. Well, I can move at speed 1 instead. So I would complete my movement at speed 1. I don't actually change my speed on the dial. I would still stay at speed 2, but I would just temporarily reduce it for this round. However, those two ships basically did collide, and each one of the ships would take a damage card. It doesn't matter whether the other ship is the enemy or my own, they're both going to take a damage card. And if I can't use my movement at all, so if we were super close and even reducing it down to 1 wouldn't have any effect, then I would just not move at all for that round. Now, one other thing I do want to point out is you can reduce your speed to 0 and effectively stop. And that can be a tactic that's useful on occasion. However, if you stop entirely, you cannot use defense tokens, and that's a big deal. We'll talk about defense tokens in the next video when we talk about attacking and, well, defending. Last but not least, let's talk about squadron movement, because squadron movement is pretty simple. Remember on our cards, we talked about how your maximum movement for your squadron is shown there, and that is on the other side of this range dial. So here we see speeds all the way up to 5, and basically if I have a movement of 3 on my X-Wings, I can move in in any direction that I want to. So it's really, really simple, and I don't need to worry about facing or anything like that. However, if at any point I am within 1 of another squadron, then I'm engaged with that squadron. That means that I cannot move, and I also cannot attack ships. I have to attack squadrons that I'm engaged with. So that's a pretty big deal, and actually I'm using the wrong side here. So if I'm within 1. Now there's all kinds of rules involving like heavy and intel and all this other stuff that can basically break those rules, but those are a bunch of edge cases we're not really going to talk about. For now, and now Ember's attacking the tool. We better get out of here. Just don't attack the ships, Ember. No, oh no. But anyways, there she goes. So that's basically all you need to know about squadron movement for now. It is pretty simple. So there you go. There are commands and movement. And commands may not seem like that big of a deal initially, but there's a lot of cards devoted to manipulating commands, sending command tokens around, doing all different stuff like that. And it's actually a very important thing. There's even cards that basically always give you an ability to do a command. That might be really good, especially for new players, because if you know you always can change to a certain command, you basically only have 3 commands to choose from at that point, and you're less likely to screw it up. Because planning ahead for 3 turns can be kind of tricky. But I'm actually surprised how used to it I got pretty quickly playing the game. I thought that was going to be one of the biggest things I did wrong, is just having horrible commands at certain rounds. And while I've done that on occasion, you might be surprised how quickly you pick up on the order you should do commands or how to mitigate commands and things like that. Well, we'll be back with our next video for attacking. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Leave me feedback, what we can do better. And attacking is pretty complicated, but it is pretty cool too, and that's why it gets its own video. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.